What's up, guys? This is your host, Danny Baylor, Danny Cakes, and you are listening to the Immeasurably More podcast. Okay, you guys, this is our very first episode. I'm so excited to start sharing with you guys my heart, where this all began, and really what is the meaning behind Immeasurably More. And so I thought it'd be so perfect for you to have an understanding of my background, who I am. So basically, our pasts have everything to do with who we are today, right? We are going to dive into who I am and the main struggles that lit a fire in me to finally take a stand and make a change. So, my name is Danny. I'm 29 years young and currently living in Newport Beach, California. You guys, that statement is truly the beginning of a lifestyle I could have never imagined. I dreamt of living in sunny SoCal my whole life, but I was raised in the Sacramento area in Northern California. I come from a family of six where I am the youngest. And in fact, I was the one who was unplanned. I was the accident. But clearly, God knit me with purpose. And the truth is, I knew it too. At a very young age, you guys, I had a desire for so much more. I never thought anyone took me seriously, and to be honest, they all broke me down. The majority of my life, I felt mocked, rejected, pretty much like a total loner. But I knew where my heart stood. I knew I was created for so much more, and I wanted to serve a big purpose. I just had absolutely no idea how I was going to fulfill that vision until 2 years ago. So prior to that, I had fallen into sadly a very weak version of myself. I'd always had this feeling of what's next? How do I move forward? I looked around and all I felt was mediocrity. How boring. I'm seriously mentally outgrowing everyone around me, and yet the majority of them found a way to somehow make me feel guilty for that. Even worse, you guys, I felt insignificant. I felt devalued, overlooked. So I kept so much to myself. I talked to myself through all of this. This is it. This is all you've worked for, and this is your life now. You guys, that thought made me completely cringe. Finally, a door opened and I had a choice. I realized I had an opportunity to finally turn away from everything I knew, which frankly, we just established was slowly breaking me. This decision, I'd have to do it all on my own. I did not know what the next 6 months looked like from where I was at, but what I did know was my spirit was completely burnt out on the lifestyle that I was living. I was so fed up standing in a room full of people who I knew thought nothing like me. So at the point where I was at of standing alone, honestly became a relief. I got to think for myself again. Yet this road was about to get so rocky. So I bet you're thinking, what's the meaning behind this immeasurably more? Well, we can find it in Ephesians. But basically, within a few weeks of this decision to walk away, there were two very significant conversations where God pieced together this vision for me. One was with a mentor from church, and she had gone through something very similar to my situation, my leap of faith, and began to tell me how God opened many doors for her. Some seriously incredible experiences. I was truly in awe. To be honest, I was so envious. And I thought to myself, God, like I'm literally looking at her like, there's no way I'm that special. Like, how could I ever have like those type of experiences? And that was honestly just the beginning of new thinking for me. And the way that we talk to ourselves, you guys, I thought so small. The second conversation was with a client at the salon I worked at. I remember driving to work that morning, bawling my eyes out, trying to make sense of this whole new season I was about to walk into. And so I got to work, put on a brave face like I always did, and went to work. He was my very first client. Our conversation led to traveling because he worked for an airline. I've always had this fantasy about one day flying first class, with all the bougie things in that little cubby, right? I asked if he'd ever taken the advantage of flying first class. He told me he went to Australia once. And I said, tell me everything. Like, did you have the cubby with the TV and the recliner and all the things? Like, I'm literally just like fantasizing over this idea of what this first class experience looks like. He said, oh, more than you could ever even imagine. So here I am in awe, daydreaming, trying to mask my pain in this conversation. He said during his flight, he took a walk throughout the plane to go check out the rest of the seating. Checked out business and how it was smaller. And by the time he got to coach, it was incredibly tight. How everyone in coach was so crammed together. And I believe he even used the word suffocating. You guys, it took everything in me to not burst right back into tears in that moment. God seriously tapped on my heart in that moment and he spoke to me. He said, Danielle, you have been living a life in coach, trying to do all of these things on your own, suffocating, but I have a place for you in first class where there is immeasurably more than you can imagine. Do you trust me? That word, you guys, suffocating, I literally could not paint a clearer picture. Even though it hurt like hell, making the decision to walk away from that lifestyle was my first sigh of relief. I soon saw this verse of immeasurably more becoming my life verse. This is what Ephesians 3:16 through 21 says. I pray that out of his glorious riches, that he may strengthen you with power through his spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and how long, how high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know that this love surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure with all the fullness of God. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. You guys, I want to be clear about one thing. This idea behind immeasurably more isn't about a lavish lifestyle or even one that's close to perfection. It's not about possessions or monetary things of value. I'm talking about inner spirit. God has immeasurably more to reveal to each of us. We require him to do immeasurably more because there's only so much that we can accomplish on our own. We are chosen. We are fully loved and accepted. He has plans to seriously exceed our worldly expectations, our small thinking. It says his power at work in our inner being, that we become rooted and established in his love, that we can be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Beyond all that we can ask or imagine or think, you guys, he is the only one who is able to do exceedingly more, infinitely more. There is no measure to what he can do. And I believe that's available to you. So, by discovering that, you guys, and the impact it has made on my life over the last 2 years, this idea of immeasurably more, that just being so embedded in my mind has affected literally the way I think about everything. Like I said, I want to touch on fitness. I want to touch on relationships, defining our worth and our friendships and who we date, our lifestyle, setting goals, what we want for our lives, and feeling honestly worthy of that. And your faith, deciding the way that we view God. Is God the same today, yesterday? Do we fully believe that all the time? If God was able to do something in my life and set a tone for me 2 years ago, I have to believe that he is doing that same thing in me today. Even when it comes to starting this podcast, I'm so excited to share with you guys about taking the leap to even do this. Do you guys even understand? It's so silly, like how much the things that we talk ourselves out of. When I even just wanted to announce this, how many people were so excited about it. But you guys, I literally talked myself out of it for a matter of a few weeks. And so I'm so pumped to go into those details and what that looked for me, which is nuts, right? Because even now I'm talking about this idea of immeasurably more and thinking bigger and expecting God to show up in an outlet like this. And I still manage to think down upon myself. And so we have to accept we're growing and that we have to, lean back on that mentality that there is more, right? And the thoughts and the ideas that we have, the desires of our hearts, like I said, as a child, you guys, I knew I wanted to make an impact and I had no idea what that looked like. Who would have known that 20 years later, I would have been sitting here creating this podcast? And I think we have to recognize those things. We have to take action. We have to own them and not let anybody else talk us out of them. Because for so long, you guys, this is what the immeasurably more is about. I let too many people keep me from stepping into everything that I was meant to do. I was so concerned about pleasing everybody else. And all that did was keep me quiet. All that did was dim my light, right? It kept me down. It separated me from, honestly, that maybe it sounds cheesy. I don't even care, but my destiny, right? My purpose on earth. And now that kind of hard is different, right? The hard that I experienced today looks a lot different than it did before. But I love sharing that we get to choose our hard. And the hard that I'm experiencing now, there's hope, there's purpose. So what has been the result for me as far as this vision for Immeasurably More and what it really painted for me mentally? You guys, this is a snowball effect into the way that I did my entire life. And that's something that I want to be discussing in these future episodes. When it comes to fitness and CrossFit, I've been doing CrossFit for nearly 10 years. January will be 10 years for me. And you guys, the way that I thought in the beginning, yes, there's aspects of that, but the way that I approach my workouts or I talk to myself through those workouts, even the way I see my body and what I can do with it and the perspective I have when I wake up in the morning and get myself to the gym, really stepping into the kind of athlete that I've always dreamt on becoming. And I think there's so much of this immeasurably more, you guys. I keep coming back to this idea of worthiness. When I think about relationships, when I think about setting goals in my business, do I feel worthy of those relationships? Do I truly believe that God can do immeasurably more than I can imagine? Right? I go back to the idea of sitting in that coffee shop with this mentor and thinking, God, how am I special enough to have something exceedingly more than I can ever imagine? But I believe I have to constantly remind myself in all these different areas of my life, he is able. And to recognize that and to, honestly surrender each of those things that I find value in to him and allow him to have authority in my life, especially, like I said, like in my faith. You guys, everything comes back down to faith and the way that we view God and what we decide that he can do through us. Again, not because of having this like lavish, perfect, idea of life, but to share with you, like, ultimately, the hardships and the struggles between all those things, the struggles I have mentally with my fitness, the struggles I have in my relationships, it's still something that I haven't perfected. Even my lifestyle and my business, all those things where I have desires and dreams. And, so we quit, like I said, shutting ourselves down and, burying these desires that we've always had that are rooted in us. And somehow we ignore because somebody else made us feel unworthy of them. But this verse says, you guys, that God, his power is at work within us. So if we have those desires and we're willing to surrender those things to him and allow him to have the opportunity to do exceedingly more, infinitely, when we think about that word, there's no absolute measure to it, no measure to like what we can accomplish. And so digging in, understanding that those desires are in our hearts for a reason and to tap into them and freaking own it, you guys. Accept this is who we are. This is my position. This is who I want to be. And I hope that is just the things that I go into and share about with you guys that you see it's so raw. It's so real. I still have plenty of struggles with the things that I face daily. And I just want you to see that like there's somebody out there who might want more, who feels unworthy of it, but decides that it's worth taking the action towards pursuing that. So hopefully by hearing my story and you guys and hearing the realness that I struggled with for so many years of my life, getting to a point where I was seriously just completely fed up. There was an actual switch that was flipped for me. There was no going back. And I hope that you feel encouraged by throughout these episodes, hearing the rawness of my struggles, that if I can overcome the things that I did, if I can walk away from relationships and things that didn't serve me, and even though I have even just, maybe more doubt than I did, or, a desire for something or hope, that was just enough for me to move forward in it. The Bible says all we need is the faith, the size of a mustard seed. You guys, the size of a mustard seed, like this, honestly, that's what I felt like I had in that moment. I'm like, okay, God, this is what I think like maybe you could probably do, but we'll see. And it's so insane because I actually ran into this mentor pretty recently and discussed with her. And I said, hey, I can't wait to tell you what God's been doing in my life. I remember sitting with you that day and being discouraged and thinking that I was insignificant. And I cannot wait to share with you all of the details of what he's been doing and what my immeasurably more looks like. You guys, that isn't just limited to me. It isn't limited to my story. And I'm here to share with you that perspective so that you can decide that there's immeasurably more in store for you. And it's all about changing your mindset, taking a stand, flipping your switch. What does that look like for you? Who are you going to surround yourself with? I hope that this completely inspires you and not just like, a temporary feeling that may be fleeting, but something that shifts in your heart and your spirit where you're done. You're ready to move forward. You're ready to like establish and discover what that looks like for you. And honestly, what it comes down to it, you guys, is discovering my true self, my inner Danny. The way that I look at this and I'm the person that I'm talking to on this podcast is the old version of me. The girl who was so willing to be people pleasing to everybody else except for herself and except for the God that she serves and no more. You guys, that version of me she's dead to me. Like, and it breaks my heart because I know that even if I was at the place where I was at, maybe spiritually or whatever, on the background that I had and the family that I had and the community, but there was still enough people in my life to break me down and keep me from becoming this version of me. And I refuse to keep my mouth quiet and keep anybody else from understanding that they can experience that too. So stay tuned to hear a little bit more about what I've discovered about myself and my true self and all of the ups and downs, the roller coaster of emotions, the ins and outs. And you guys, I'm here to share all of that with you. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you enjoy the show and you want to keep up with me or ask any questions, shoot me a DM or even some suggestions about what you'd like to hear, you can find me on Instagram at Danny Cakes, DANNNI Cakes. On the next episode, we'll be talking about all the things that led me to take this leap of faith on this podcast, my hesitations, my self doubt, and how I almost talked myself out of it. Thank you guys so much for listening. And if you enjoy the show, please rate, review, subscribe, and share to anyone you know who'd find value in this content. So I'm going to send you guys off with one of my favorite verses, 1 Peter 2:9. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light.